When you were a teen, you likely had the dreaded talk with your parents. Now it's time to have another difficult conversation with mom and dad. But this one's not about the birds and the bees. This is about dollars and cents. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about what happens when people your age inherit investments from their parents. As advisors, we help our clients avoid the huge tax penalty that's associated with inheriting assets from mom and dad. Welcome to the Fishbowl. I'm Brad, Certified Financial Planner, along with Matt, Certified Financial Planner. We're with Seaside Wealth Management in Carlsbad, California. Let's dive in. Matt, I got to ask you, how was the wedding?
It was phenomenal. I mean, the day started off that it rained, so I heard that's good luck. It was supposed to be cloudy, but you know what? The sun ended up coming out, and I would relive that day over and over.
I loved it. I mean, it was so fun being there, and you and the guys looked so good, and God, Gabby
I've got
looked
some
great.
new hardware on my hand now.
Right?
Looks good.
How you feeling about that?
Feels real good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was such a special day. Everybody was there. So fun.
And Gabby already left me. She went on a solo trip back home to visit her family just because she doesn't know the next time she's going to be able to do that. So
Right.
all good there.
Right.
But I heard with you, kids baseball is starting to wind down, right?
Winding down,
Yes.
right? The calendar is starting to open up. We don't even really know what that feels like.
So you must have some vacation planned, right?
Yes, to a baseball tournament in Florida in the middle of
So
July.
baseball's ending, but then tournament for vacation.
Right, vacation for baseball tournaments.
All the things I have to look forward to.
I know. Hey, rec ball. Keep it little league. Don't do travel ball. Right.
Oh, great.
So this topic, I'm really excited to dive into this topic because really we get questions asked all the time, and quite frankly, it's very complex. So we got to talk about when you're inheriting an IRA from mom and dad. There's required minimum distributions, there's the Secure Act, there's the 10-year rule. I mean, there's all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through that. What do people need to know?
Yeah, it gets very complicated. I mean, I guess let's first start with there's a few different rules of how the required minimum distribution has to be taken out.
Okay.
2019 and before, you have what's called the stretch rule, meaning you can stretch these required distributions over your entire life. So this is more tax favorable. But in 2020, they announced the Secure Act 2.0, and this introduced the 10-year rule. And so what this is it now says that if you're inheriting dollars from your parent and they weren't taking required minimum distributions, you have then 10 years to deplete this account. So pros and cons, right? There's not necessarily required minimum distributions each year. The IRS isn't saying you have to take some dollars out each year.
Unless mom and dad were taking RMDs.
Right. So if they were, then you have to. But let's say they weren't taking required distributions. But this can open up a lot of tax landmines because it's a new rule. Not a lot of people know, well, how should I start taking these distributions out? Maybe I just want to let it sit there for 9 years and grow tax deferred.
Right.
But that can cause now a big distribution in that 10th year, which can cause a whole mess of taxes for you.
Right, just we call a ticking tax time bomb, as we say. So what about when someone inherits the IRA from mom and dad? You know, the IRS just clarified this last year, and they made it clear that if your parents were essentially taking the RMDs, now you must continue taking those RMDs.
Right. So the way it works is they're still using the lifetime table. And so that's just a number that you divide by your age. And you're typically much younger than your parents. So yes, you would have required distributions each year, but they're going to be much smaller. And if you just stuck to those required distributions over the 10 years, it would not deplete the full account.
Right.
And so then you're running into an additional 25% penalty on the distribution
If you don't
get it all out by
Right.
then.
Or in the example of needing to take RMDs every year based on your life expectancy, if you fail to take that RMD, you get hit with the 25% penalty.
Right, and people are like, 25%, that's crazy, but this is actually a huge benefit. It used to be 50%.
Yeah, right. I guess it's good news.
Oh, so yeah, that's something to just be aware of if and when you're inheriting these accounts.
So let's talk strategy for the folks out there who are inheriting IRAs. If mom and dad were taking RMDs, and so people have to take the RMDs too, and they got 10 years from December 31st of the calendar year where mom and dad died. That's basically the time frame. How do you coach people to think about, should they delay and take more later? Should they take more now? What comes to mind?
Yeah, a lot of things, and of course, it depends on your situation. So if you need help there, I mean, call our office. We can talk it through. But generally speaking, I mean, you could just take well, you may be in your highest earning income years that year,
Right.
so it could cost you a lot of dollars if you're taking just normal distributions out each year.
Right.
So maybe you're getting close to retirement. And at retirement, you're going to be in a much lower tax bracket. So it
Right.
could make a lot of sense just to take the required distribution.
The minimum.
Yeah, if you even have that.
Wait till you retire.
And then take out larger distributions. So backload the situation there.
Backload it. Right. In that situation.
Right.
You told me a great story about your client who was younger. Tell the audience.
Well, so not necessarily younger. She's 63. So 63 is an important age because that's the first year that the IRA or Medicare is going to be looking at your income for
Right.
Medicare purposes or IRMA
Oh,
purposes.
Irma's not your friend.
And so she, unfortunately or fortunately, has a large inherited IRA and also a large IRA. So she's going to have large required distributions for her own IRA in the future, but also has this inherited IRA that she needs to take required distributions from, or does not need to take required distributions from. She has the free will to do 10 years of however she wants to. And it may sound crazy, but we did some pretty in-depth tax planning just to see, well, what makes most sense in terms of paying taxes and then distribution strategy. And for her, it makes a lot of sense to be taking a front-loaded distribution. So and this is going to bump her up into the third or fourth tier for IRMA, which is adding, $500 a month for her IRMA taxes. But with her job, she had a reimbursement of about $2,800 a year. And so she has a pension as well. So she was going to be in the second tier of IRMA either way.
Yeah.
You can see how this is getting complicated. But so the difference between the fourth tier and the tier she's going to be in no matter what because of the pension was about $2,600 of taxes extra a year. She has a subsidy of $2,800. So it makes sense to do the distributions now to make sure that we get the account liquidated, because our biggest concern is that the account continues to grow, and then now we're running into the required distributions on our own account in the future.
Right. And then by her getting hit with the IRMA, it's really a 1-year deal.
1-year deal, right.
Rather than forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a lot that's at play. People always ask me, can we do a Roth conversion? When I inherit IRAs from mom and dad, can I convert them? The answer is no.
Right. The other question I get asked on inherited accounts, can I do a QCD or do I do a donor advised fund? Well, if you do a distribution, it's counting as taxable income to you, and
Right.
then you could give to charity.
Right.
But just know that it doesn't necessarily offset the taxes. You need to really dial that in to see if that strategy works.
That's right. That's right. So there's 5 exceptions when somebody inherits IRA from mom and dad. There's 5 exceptions to the 10-year rule. We've got if someone's disabled, chronically ill, if it's a minor child. In fact, the other one was if the person who died was less than 10 years difference in age. And I think that's an interesting one.
Right. And then the fifth one, most common, is that the spouse gets to potentially eliminate the 10-year rule. You can actually inherit the IRA of your spouse as if it's your own. So
Right.
roll it into your own IRA.
Right.
So
That's a
there's
better
your
strike. Right.
But yeah, you bring up the less than 10 years. That's very interesting because it happens more often than you think.
A brother, a cousin, family member, friend.
So instead of having to do 10 years, now you get your entire lifetime to spread out those taxes too. So very beneficial.
I'd even, if this applies to anybody out there, I think that's a huge opportunity to then stretch those RMDs over their lifetime, which is a big tax savings.
And then you did mention another one of the minor child. So just know that it doesn't eliminate the 10-year rule. What it does is that if you're a minor, up until age 18, you don't have to take any required distributions, and there's no 10-year rule from there. It's from when you turn 18, that's when the 10-year rule clock starts.
So what about taxable investments? Let's talk about that, because it's a whole different strategy when you're inheriting taxable assets from mom and dad or anyone else. Because now that you have the step up in play, step up in basis in play, I should
Right. And this is something I wouldn't lean 100% of your plan on this rule. It's something that's always on the chopping block to be
Meaning,
changed.
could Congress can take it away?
Well, so let's back up. What the step up in cost basis is let's say that you had a $100,000 home, and then that home grew to $1 million. if your parents sold it while they were alive, making things easy, it would be 900,000 of gains, not taking into account the Section 121 exclusion.
Right. But there'd be a lot of gains.
Sure. So call it 900,000 of gains that they would owe capital gains taxes on. So let's say mom and dad decide to stay in the home, and that way into the future they pass away. Now that $100,000 gets stepped up to whatever the home value is on, or the basis gets stepped up to that million. So kids can inherit that $1 million home, virtually sell it, owing no taxes.
No taxes. So the step up in basis is really helpful on these taxable assets, whether it's real estate or investments in a taxable account, a trust account, a brokerage account.
Yeah, all non-retirement accounts, they have that same step up in cost basis with current law.
Right. So I like to think about, let's say mom and dad own some stocks, same thing, very low cost basis in the stocks in their taxable account. Those would be the ones that we'd want to not sell towards the end of their life, because of that step up in basis allows whoever receives it to inherit it virtually tax-free.
Yeah, depending on what the individual holdings are, and then their risk tolerance. But yeah, it would make more sense most of the time to roll those dollars or get the step up, and then now the inheritor can diversify it outside of that.
Right. Right. And then back to the home situation, I see it sometimes where mom and dad are getting older and they're thinking, and maybe they need to go to an assisted living or they need some help. And so the kids sell the house to then help pay for things. Often that's, if you can avoid selling the house later in life, better to let the step up and play. But that's where, let's say you need the funds to actually help with long-term care. We're not huge fans of reverse mortgages, but that's the one exception to the rule where maybe that reverse mortgage comes into play.
Yeah, and they're not as bad as what they used to be. They have some limits on there. The interest rates are still pretty high, but if you know why you're doing it and what you're trying to accomplish, it can make sense.
Right, so that way you preserve the step up in basis on the home with a ton of gains in it, but then you come up with the funds to pay for assisted living for mom or dad. Yeah.
Yeah, and then similar concept with life insurance. Again, life insurance is out there to provide a death benefit. And so if mom and dad have a life insurance policy in place and they can't afford to pay the premiums, just know that life insurance death benefits are totally tax-free to the beneficiaries right now. So it can, again, make a lot of sense to keep those in force and not necessarily drop those policies.
Yeah, and so I got one for you. We know that when kids inherit IRAs from mom and dad, you can't do Roth conversions on the inherited IRA. But what about the concept of mom or dad doing the conversion while they're alive?
It's a great strategy. And of course, if they're in a low tax bracket, it makes a lot of sense for them to pay the taxes on their tax rates.
Right.
So that way the kids or whoever the beneficiaries are inherit tax-free dollars.
Yeah.
And a couple things is that with Roth or inherited Roth IRAs, there's still the 10-year rule, but there's no required distribution. So, I mean, you could let it cook for 10 years,
compound and grow, tax-free.
Right, and then take a big distribution at that point, and then no tax consequences at that.
Right.
And so, I mean, again, going back, this outside-the-box thinking, but maybe mom and dad are converting in a higher than preferable tax bracket because they do want to pass on that tax-free wealth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you look at where we're at kind of from a tax bracket standpoint, and I think clearly anybody in a 10 or 12% bracket pounding the table convert all day long. Mom and dad should convert, or our audience, if they're in that bracket, they should convert. But historically, now we got the 22 and the 24% bracket, which not as exciting to convert there. But to your point, and I think a lot of people are going to be found in that 22 or 24 bracket, when you start to think about where tax rates are going to be in the future, and you look at the federal government's deficit and interest rates are higher, I believe that taxes have nowhere to go but up.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And so it can make a lot of sense, like we said, just to convert to transfer tax-free wealth to the next generation.
Right. I mean, just it could long-term. We've modeled this thing out for clients. We do multi-year projections, and the savings can be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and a lot of the times we're seeing tax savings and increased liquid net worth over time. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So up till now, we've talked a lot about income taxes. And this is maybe less relevant today just because with the rules. But what about the estate tax? This is one of those things that used to be so important, but now with how high the exemption is, I mean, God, close to $14 million.
Right.
per person, but just how are you coaching people to think about that stuff?
I mean, it's just something that we need to stay ahead of all the time because that very well could come back down. And who
True.
knows how
True.
far it's going to come down.
Right.
What I do know, though, is that if you do end up using that exclusion and it does drop below what you've already used, from what I heard, it's not going to penalize you. Let's say that, you inherited 8 million and it drops down to 5 million. You're
Right.
not being penalized on that 3 million.
Right. So it's interesting. So with each person now, each parent can essentially die with almost $14 million per person. So an estate of 28 million or less is going to be passed on to the next generation tax free. So that's why I say it's not as relevant. But the Tax Cuts and Job Act, which was supposed to sunset in 2026. We think it's going to get 4 more years, so we probably have till 2030. Once that sunsets, the 14 million was going to go back down to, I think, somewhere between 5 and 6 per person. So still a chunk of change,
Right.
But to your point, it's going to be changing.
Yeah, and then once that ends too, the tax rates could go up too. So you were saying that the 12 now goes to 15. 22 goes to 24, 25,
Yeah.
and then 24 goes to 28.
That's
so
right.
I mean, even if you did conversions now and you're in the 24%, you could be saving 3 to 4% on your taxes just by doing it now rather than waiting a few years.
It's like tax arbitrage.
Yeah.
You're prepaying in a lower tax environment. Absolutely. So, yeah, there's a lot of complexity to this, and it can be tricky. And the hard part is you're going through your mom or dad has just passed away, and that's a hard thing. You've most likely been dealing with some issues leading up to that. So. We run into people that aren't always the clearest of minds.
Right, but I mean, that's a good point, is that if you do all this planning ahead of time, it allows you to focus on the grieving and not necessarily have to focus on the financial planning because you have the plan in place.
Right, absolutely. Money and family can often cause a lot of pain and suffering, but the real tragedy of it all is it's completely avoidable with some proper planning. At Seaside, we pride ourselves on the fact that working with clients is so much more than just about crunching numbers. We help clients navigate through life's most difficult seasons and bring clarity and peace of mind around money. Once again, I'm Brad, here with Matt. Thanks for listening. You can find the podcast on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts by searching for The Fishbowl. Make sure to follow us and also share this with anybody who you think can benefit. And until next time, keep it wavy.